Did you know that the FIA issued two official documents, just 12 minutes apart, with completely opposite decisions regarding the same on-track incident between Hamilton and Verstappen? How is it possible that such a decisive sanction is contradicted by the FIA's own evidence? Today we reveal one of the biggest recent scandals in the history of Formula One, and what it could mean for the future of this sport. It all started on a weekend that, at first, seemed to be just another one on the calendar. The 2025 Mexican Grand Prix was marked by the natural expectation of a season that has begun at a frenetic pace, with multiple teams in the real fight for the championship. But no one imagined that, beyond sports, that Sunday was going to ignite one of the biggest institutional controversies in the recent history of Formula One. The maneuver between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen occurred on lap 18, during a moment of high tactical pressure, where both drivers had been pushing to the limit after a neutralization caused by a minor accident in Sector 3. Hamilton, starting on fresher tires after an early stop, looked to overtake on the outside in Turn 4, one of the most treacherous areas of the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez. When braking, Hamilton blocked the right front tire, his car destabilized and ended up going out towards the escape area, thus overtaking Verstappen. He did not return the position. And that's where it all began. Minutes later, the FIA issued Document 36. It categorically stated that Hamilton had left the track and gained a lasting advantage, and he was given a standard 10-second penalty. At that moment, both the teams and the commentators assumed that it was a clear, technical, unquestionable decision. However, exactly 12 minutes later, Document 37 was published, and the entire Formula One universe seemed to come to a halt. In that second document, the FIA itself recognized that Hamilton had no real possibility of complying with the reinstatement protocol because he was traveling too fast due to the brake lock, and that it was physically impossible to follow the indicated escape route. In other words, the penalty was based on a breach that the FIA itself later admitted was impossible to avoid. This is not a bureaucratic technicality. This institutional contradiction shook the credibility of the regulatory system. Two official reports, signed by the same entity, talking about the same action, just minutes apart and reaching completely opposite conclusions. Never in the modern history of F1 has there been such a blatant disconnect within the rules governing body. And this was not just any maneuver between two common pilots. We are talking about Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen, two titans with a history of crashes, frictions, and chapters that have defined entire seasons. When an action between them is poorly managed, the repercussion is immediate. But if an internal lack of coordination in the FIA is also added, the damage is multiplied by 1,000. This type of contradiction generates a feeling of legal vacuum, where neither the drivers themselves nor the teams know with certainty what is punishable and what is not. How can you compete at the limit if the rules are applied in a contradictory way? How can a pilot adapt his behavior if an official decision can be reversed or contradicted by another document minutes later? When the contradiction between Document 36 and Document 37 became known, the initial silence of the paddock was deathly. It was a type of tension not often seen in an environment already accustomed to competitive chaos. But this was not just another yellow flag, nor a simple poorly executed strategy. It was an institutional failure naked before the eyes of the world. And the first voice to break that silence was none other than that of Frédéric Vasseur, the director of the Ferrari team. Vasseur not only expressed his discomfort, he did so with unusual clarity in an environment where public statements are often measured and diplomatic. From the pit wall, in full live broadcast, Vasseur described Hamilton's sanction as very, very severe. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. His real fury was directed at the steward's decision-making process itself, which he described as not very well managed. And that phrase was not coincidental. It was a direct accusation of the FIA, alluding to the fact that the lack of coherence had tangibly damaged not only the career of its driver, but that of the entire team. What really ignited Ferrari's ire was not just the sanction itself, but its strategic impact. Vasseur argued that those 10 seconds were penalizing beyond paper. Hamilton was caught behind a train of cars on a circuit where overtaking is virtually impossible off the main straight. With that, the possibility of fighting for the podium disappeared in the blink of an eye. And for a team like Ferrari, which has worked for years to clear its reputation of tactical errors and rebuild its credibility, losing positions due to a contradictory decision was devastating. But Vasseur did not stop there. He took the discussion to a comparative level. He noted that Max Verstappen had performed an even more extreme maneuver in that same corner, completely cutting the grass after a braking error, and did not receive a single reprimand. He said that Verstappen, jumped the chicane on the grass for about 100 meters. Why then was one sanctioned and the other not? The implication was obvious. The application of the regulation had been selective. And that, in modern Formula One, is pure dynamite. The case even generated internal divisions. Some members of the Red Bull team avoided making public comments, aware that Verstappen's maneuver was also under scrutiny. But privately, sources close to the team admitted to being surprised by the lack of sanction. Because if Verstappen was not penalized for such an obvious cut, what then is the exact criterion that governs decisions on the track? At this point, the FIA was not only losing the team's trust, but also the public narrative. The perception in the media, social networks, and specialized forums was unanimous. Something was rotten in the sanctions process. And the most alarming thing is that it was not a problem of technical interpretation. It was an institutional failure, documented in real time with official files in hand. Over the next few hours, the atmosphere became almost political. Scuderia Ferrari, traditionally a strong voice in regulatory debates, began mobilizing other teams to demand transparency. An extraordinary meeting was requested with the sports stewards and representatives of the FIA to explain how two official documents could come into such flagrant contradiction. But until now, the federation had given nothing but evasive measures. For Vasseur and his team, this could not stop there. And for many within the paddock, this incident could be the trigger for a comprehensive review of the disciplinary system in Formula One. The question was no longer whether Hamilton deserved the sanction. The question was much bigger. Can a world championship continue under a structure that betrays itself and applies sanctions at will? With the scandal already unleashed, the focus shifted from the political drama to the technical. It was time for evidence. The emotions could be debatable, the statements could be nuanced, but the telemetric data, those don't lie. And in this case, they offered brutal clarity about what really happened in Turn 4 of the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez. It was there that the official narrative, sustained by Document 36, began to collapse under the weight of scientific evidence. Ferrari, anticipating controversy, went ahead and published an internal report with fragments of Hamilton's SF25 telemetry. The first thing that could be confirmed is that the moment Hamilton reaches the braking zone, he activates the brake at the usual reference point. However, the braking pressure on the right front tire generates an instant lockup, a complete loss of traction that causes the tire to stop rotating. This type of lock generates an unbalanced load on the front axle and forces the driver to correct instinctively to avoid completely losing the car. The result was immediate. The car became understeering, that is, the front axle lost its ability to turn, while the rear axle still responded. Hamilton did the right thing. He turned towards the escape, trying to control a car at the limit of his physical capabilities. And here comes the most important thing. The car's sensors indicated a curve entry speed that exceeded, by at least 14 kilometers per hour, the average speed recorded in previous laps in that same curve. This confirms that, at that time, Hamilton had no way of following the standard line without suffering a direct collision. But there is more. The GPS data compared between Hamilton's car and Verstappen's show that after rejoining the track, the Ferrari driver not only did not gain time, he lost 1.3 seconds with respect to the optimal lap pace. The supposed lasting advantage that justified the sanction simply did not exist. From a technical point of view, the maneuver did not generate any sporting gain. What's more, it put him in a disadvantageous situation, trapped in dirty air and unable to activate DRS for several subsequent sectors. The FIA in Document 37 recognized exactly this. The text says, the driver had a justifiable reason for not complying with the race director's instructions. In legal language, that phrase is not a nuance, it is an implied absolution. He recognizes that Hamilton did not act with the intention of cutting the track, but was forced to do so by the physical conditions of the vehicle and the track. That is, it was a reflex act of self-protection, not an illegal strategy. In parallel, the onboard cameras confirmed the story told by the data. From the point of view of the helmet, you can see how Hamilton struggles to stop the car, how he turns the steering wheel hard while his car continues straight, sliding on a surface full of dust, loose rubber, and very little grip. The radios also contributed a key piece. Immediately after the maneuver, Hamilton exclaimed, "The grip there is so low. The grip there is so low." That statement is not an excuse. It is the emotional confirmation of a real physical problem. The surface of the escape was not in a position to allow a safe re-entry along the route marked by the race director. And here comes one of the most worrying aspects of the case. FIA regulations require that, in the event of leaving the track, drivers must rejoin following a specific return line, marked by cones or painted lines. But in this case, that route was drawn over an area where the level of grip is extremely low, and where a car arriving at committed speed does not have the space or traction necessary to make the turn. Requiring that a driver in that condition comply with that route is simply ignoring the basic physics of motorsports. So the question is, why did document 36 ignore all this information? Why was a standard penalty of 10 seconds applied without considering telemetric data, speed, or track conditions? The answer points to an endemic evil in commissioners' decision-making: automation. Instead of evaluating the context, the textbook sanction is applied. Without nuances, no interpretation, without justice. Because if the data shows that there was no intention, that there was no gain, and that there was no alternative, what is the point of the penalty? What message is being sent to younger drivers who are learning where the limits are? What should have been an intense maneuver, typical of the high competitive level of F1, ended up becoming the symbol of a system that is failing in its main mission: guaranteeing sporting justice. The contradiction between documents 36 and 37 is not an isolated error. It is the most visible symptom of a disease that has been brewing in Formula One for a long time: the disconnection between sports regulations and reality on the track. What in theory should have been a tool to guarantee justice and equity has become a machinery that, at times, acts with more rigidity than judgment. The penalty imposed on Lewis Hamilton for an act that the FIA itself described as involuntary is not only a controversial decision. It is an institutional confession of incoherence. When the regulatory body itself publicly contradicts itself, without offering a clear explanation or an official correction, the credibility of the entire system is in crisis. And we're not just talking about credibility with the public. We talk about the fundamental relationship between the teams, the drivers, and those who apply the rules. Because in a world championship where differences are measured in thousandths of a second, where a single penalty can define a title, there can be no room for ambiguous decisions, nor room for double interpretations. Either sports justice is applied with consistency and context, or the championship loses its legitimacy. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.